We are live, and it's just a little bit before 5. I'm a bit early, James. Look at that.
Well, it's cocktail hour. Somewhere in the world, it's cocktail hour.
Wonderful. How are you?
Very well. How are you doing this week? How's your week? It's been quite chilly this week in the UK.
It's been chilly. It's chillier where you are. I've actually got sunshine. Do you know what I'm enjoying? The longer days. It's beautiful.
Yes.
It's absolutely messing up my lighting because I just don't know how to do my lighting. But the longer days are wonderful.
Fantastic. And I think we have a northerner joining us today as well as our guest.
I know it's all going a bit Scottish, isn't it?
Yeah.
Shall we go straight into the show?
Let's do it.
Let me introduce. I'm going to read my guest's intro because I don't want to get it wrong because I don't want to. We're very lucky. Our guest is Gordon Hewitt CBE, who has a global reputation for his leading-edge thinking about how companies can outperform in today's highly dynamic and complex business system. He's been a visiting distinguished professor at Ross School of Business, University of Michigan, where he formed a powerful partnership with the late and great C.K. Prahalad. He's widely acknowledged as one of the world's leading authorities on competitive disruption and game-changing strategy. And recently, he's been appointed as honorary professor at the new Adam Smith Business School in Glasgow. Let's welcome our guest, Gordon Hewitt. How are you, Gordon?
Thank you very much, Maria. Thank you. Suffering from the cold, I'm afraid. So I'll try to keep warm in the virtual studio here. It's been bitterly cold. This is Beast from the East Mark II.
Absolutely. So Gordon, thank you so much for joining us today. You have such an incredible reputation in the world of business and business management as well. So I thought we'd maybe start by something you're really known for is around change and thinking about how things are changing and strategy and competitiveness. So how has your strategy changed over the past 12 months through this world, this strange pandemic time that we've been going through? And specifically, because we have a lot of speakers here that are joining us today, how has your strategy changed as a communicator?
Great question. One of the hardest things, as you know, and all of our audiences will know today, one of the hardest things to do is to apply your own analytics to yourself. Much easier to apply them to other people. Business school professors specialize in it. we write history very well. We develop a core competence in hindsight. But to apply it to yourself is a very good discipline. If I may come back, depending on our timing today, James, a couple of times to say, very often what companies need is not more data. They need a reality check. They need to be grounded where they actually are, not where they think they are, and so on. So just a very quick answer to a great question for starters. My so-called act has really changed significantly in the last few years. Some of it, James, was pre-COVID-19, nothing to do with COVID-19. And so we have to keep that in mind. The big changes we're seeing don't all come from this appalling virus that's hit the planet. And so some of those changes have just been vastly accentuated. The bits to do with COVID-19, and any of our speaker guests will tell you that the same thing, is that basically what's happened is COVID has really changed our communication methodology. We have to think very carefully about getting a message across where we actually can't see a lot of the audience. And the audience are not in one place. You don't get the buzz of the crowd, you know what I mean? You don't get the emotional reactions. We forget how important that is. And we're delivering our so-called content. So, I mean, that clearly has changed. And like everyone else, I have to put a sort of learner plate up at the beginning and learn how to do the best I can in an environment that's really quite strange to me, But I think that the main things which were changing anyway, and so COVID has just given it a turn and a twist, has been the fact that for a long, long time, because you're categorized as a speaker, as a subject, so I would be invited along to talk to a company, maybe in my private work, James, on strategic planning or something like that, a talk, little round of applause, fill in the forms, see you next time. That has changed remarkably now because I'm one of those people who really believe that strategy is much more of a thinking system than a planning process. And so a lot of the work I do, yes, I'm still talking to people and so on, but it's intact teams and groups who can actually take the stuff. And I help them, even when I'm there, James, the best I can, to actually begin to apply it to some of the more intractable issues that their institution is actually facing, while I'm there in real time. Not just listen to what Gordon said, go away, good luck, find a way to apply it. So I'm working with them. And in doing so, I'm also becoming, it sounds a little bit pretentious, and I don't mean it to be, but the word coach is often overused, I think. The world planet is full of coaches. But if you examine what they coach on, a lot of it is behavioral psychology, and it's much needed, So they're coaching people in better behavioral skills, compliance, building good relationships, all that is taking I suppose, updated self-improvement,
Yeah.
I'm doing a lot of work as a strategic coach now, because I believe that strategy is about strategic acumen, James. So developing a very sophisticated, deep, wide, insightful view of what really is happening around us. And so helping the HR community, who really are the source of strategic credibility, what kind of leaders are they developing? What kind of experiences are they giving them to do what I'm talking about in the first place? So a lot of my work is also now about coaching individuals to feel happy with what I'm talking about.
But I guess on that, we don't have a word for it yet, but I know some of the work you do, you kind of have that coaching role where you're coaching individuals, but then you have a mentorship role because you've been there, done that as well. And then you have a kind of teaching role as well, which is kind of different from the coaching. So you've kind of got all these things. We need to come up with a word. Maria, help us out here. Can we come up with a word?
Well, yeah, I don't know the word, but I was going to ask you, and I think you've touched on it a little bit already, actually, but about, what is the task of strategy and how is it changing in today's dynamic, complex industries?
The reason I love those words is that it needs context. Too much discussion about strategy occurs as if there's no context to it. And often, again, with my good friends in HR, they go straight to what are the 7 things that make an effective leader? I say it's the wrong starting point. The question is not what is leadership. The issue is leadership for what? What are we trying to get the organization to respond to adequately in real time? So I think in one sense, Maria, the task of strategy, what it's there to do is to provide, and I'm very strong on this, a framework for action. It's a framework and it leads to action. It's not a debating chamber. But for hundreds, if not more years, going back to all the famous stories about Chinese generals like Sun Tzu, strategy has only ever had 3 components, but the context for doing it is changing remarkably. So if we say take 3 pillars of strategy, it's first of all departing from where you are. But that leads back to what I said at the beginning. Do we know where we are? I see companies doing SWOT, SWOT. A lot of it's delusional. It's not fact. It's their perception of strengths, perception of weaknesses, perception of. So if we can get a firm group of, no one would have bet, frankly, in my community, and including myself, on Apple being a major contender for leadership in the world of digital entertainment. Sony and others were much better placed with much more knowledge of areas, you know this, James, in terms of music, one of the biggest in the world and so on. So in terms of classic, where are we starting from? That's an important question. Not just where are we going, which is point 2, but where are we starting from? And to bring a real clinical form of examination to that. Number 2, of course, is where are we going to? And that's what I'm saying. If where we're going to is in strategy is the old phrase of, are we actually just playing the same game better? Is it the same game, the industry as we've always defined it, James? You know what I mean? The same business model as everyone else. So do we get a lead on competitors, Maria, by efficiency gains? A lot of what I see as strategy called strategic plans is next year's financial plan extended by 4 years. It's elongated budgeting, hoping that somehow by extracting inefficiency from the value chain, we can get ahead. But if the debate in a complex and very radical environment is not for efficiency, but for relevance, a lot of companies really spend a fortune and great pain and stress passing the efficiency test, but they lose the relevance war. And in industry after industry, you see this happening. So I think that the 3 things I'm going to in strategy are: 1, a very firm, realistic view of where we're starting from. Where is here? Secondly, the best guess we can make of where is there, but it's not clear. It's not just like the product you used to make or last year's industry plus X%. So I really try to bring that thing to life. And often these things called mission statements and vision statements, for me, they don't cut it. They're good, you need them, but they don't cut it. I've seen a lot of vision statements, and you could take them off the wall, hand them randomly to other boards. No one would notice much difference when they come in for the board meeting next time. So that's the second thing. When Sony, which I was a great fan of and worked a bit with, wanted to move inevitably, Maria, from the world of consumer electronics. You know what I mean in that sense, James?
Yeah, yeah.
They are physical bits and pieces that do things. They show images, they play music, wonderful, and great design and whatever. They had it all. But their chairman at that time, because I was involved in a program that they ran at Michigan, Nobuyuki Ide, the great Ide, the founder of Walkman, said, we're marching forward to the high ground of DE, digital entertainment. That's a much tougher thing, James, to define. It's not clear where the boundaries are, who's in, who's not in. So the second thing is, how do you move from here with a reality check to there, which is very ambiguous in today's world? It's not just last year plus X%. And then this, I think the word execution is overplayed. It's how do you manage the migration? The migration is an important word, because you're still running an old business and a new business, Maria, side by side. You know what I mean? And so managing migration and all the friction that causes, to do it quickly, with low risk, with ease and so on, to be able to do that kind of stuff, almost like developing a new body, a new skin, is not the easiest thing in the world. These three things, when strategy was just in a world where tomorrow was a little bit like yesterday, it was a lot easier. But if we're saying where is there and how you get there, it means you've got to bring into the company not just different processes, it's new forms of knowledge, new forms of insight. And we all know one of the great cliches is that old knowledge is very hostile to new knowledge. It gets marginalized and it threatens too many people. So I think strategy has got into this exciting period now where it's about the same three things, but you put them into a highly dynamic rate of change very fast. So often the game has moved on by the time you've got the numbers. And secondly, complex. And I mean, it's forgive me, Marie, for making an academic point. Far too many people confuse complex with complicated. I see it all the time. And they use simple as the opposite of complex. It's nonsense. It's complicated is what they mean. It's a hard one, it'll make the brain hurt. But like an algorithm, you can get to the end of the tunnel with an answer. Complex, made famous by the great Santa Fe Institute, which we've supported for many years through Michigan, the world's leading research center for the study of complexity. And what they mean by complexity is any system where the different variables you have are now interdependent. They affect like a ricochet, like a bagatelle. They begin to affect each other. And I think back to early, when I was a young economics lecturer, we were told to make students assume that my behavior doesn't affect anyone's behavior. Hey, wow, go and tell that to Facebook. Your behaviors.
So complex, not as complicated. So I think like whiskey, for example, is complex, not complicated. It's not complicated to know the process that you have to go to make whiskey. You need barley and grains and things, but it's complex to make it well, to do it well.
Yes, and because things interact in a way that are very difficult to predict, have to come back to the human spirit. You don't know necessarily how it will turn out. And often, Steve Jobs said this many times, sometimes consumers don't know their needs in advance. So you've got to really stay on top of this thing as the thing evolves. You think of it, I was talking to a group yesterday at Glasgow University through Zoom. And I was saying, and they're that age, James, they are the children of the digital revolution. And I said, if we were sitting here 12 years ago and you had to put a bet on who would emerge even just 10 years from now, that would be today, as the global leaders in every dimension of mobile telephony, would you bet on a group called Nokia, Motorola, and BlackBerry? Or would you bet on Apple, Samsung, and Huawei? Guess that the second group had.
So we're getting into the space now, like
professors were teaching this too.
Yeah, so we're getting into the space now of competitive disruption and different companies within different industries being disrupted as well. A lot of organizations, they're affected by competitive disruption when it happens to them there and now, and so they're reactive in some way. How should companies perhaps handle competitive disruption differently so that they're not victims to competitive disruption, but they're actually maybe enablers of some type of even creative destruction, we would call it?
I think it's great. And the idea, of course, is not new. It's often paraded as new, competitive disruption. But it was laid out perfectly by the Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter in 1942 in the book Capitalism, Socialism, and Democracy. And he talked about the waves of creative destruction. It was there. It's been there for decades. We sometimes parade it as if it's all new stuff. So I would say the following thing. First of all, disruption in any system, especially economics, is only disruptive to incumbents, to people who are sitting there enjoying enormous prowess and majesty as leaders of the existing industry. For many others, it's a blessed relief. Suddenly, where have you been all of our lives? So, number one, I think one of the things about disruption is we have to teach people how to see at least the signals in advance. Far too much hindsight. We write our elegant case studies when it's all happened. The question is, what did we pick up? And one of the theories I'm working on late in my academic life is markets not as data, but as signals. We send signals. You'll know from your own background in music, in 20 years ago, how did the digital revolution arrive? Not with 30 PowerPoints, with one kid, young student, brilliant young man from Boston called Sean Fanning. He came up with something called Napster. Now, the question is, you can describe it, the company, but how do you interpret its impact on the evolution of the industry? And immediately the lawyers went in, and I understand it well. I'm in an IP industry. I don't like my stuff being stolen. But they said this is all about the children, the teenagers especially, not paying free rider, not paying for listening to music. And then they go on from there. So I think number one, to teach people about interpreting signals. Number two, from my work at Santa Fe, almost all important signals originate, James, at the edge of the industry, not the core. One of the most important things for boards is to think about the core. But significant change usually originates at the perimeter, not at the core. So enabling people, not just the board, but enabling people in the kind of coaching I do to pick up, interpret, look at the consequences of these weeks. Where could it go next? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is absolutely critical. So I think there's a teaching piece and a coaching piece there. And some of the work I do is to sit with people and say, whether you think you're high or low on the danger list, let's go through some of the symptoms here and ask if you are at all going to be affected by some of these. And how do we get into it in advance? You know what I mean? And try to move the industry in our direction.
So, Maria, does this keep you awake at night? Competitors lurking somewhere in Kuala Lumpur or Buenos Aires or...
Well, do you know what? I'll tell you what, James, I whenever I speak to Gordon, for me, it's like a masterclass, and I'm always writing notes because I'm thinking, okay, how do I apply this? Because it's sort of like, this is like step-by-step masterclass. How do I apply this to my business? And I always come away and it's like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. So I love it. So listen, one last question from us, and then we'll throw it open because we have some comments from our viewers. My final question is a tough one here for you. What would you say is the biggest challenge facing companies today?
I would say, because I'm trained as a so-called academic, it's just logically a conclusion to the three questions that went before. And I think the great of all the challenges, I mean, that's a few shows on its own. I think that the biggest issue is not being able to understand, if you're a senior executive, the hidden enemy, the invisible enemy. And the issue for most companies, not how do you manage change, Maria, but how do you handle inertia from physics, stuck in fixed position, unable to move despite the best attempts of good people, lots of data, warning signals. Handling inertia is a huge issue. And the work I did in the later years of the great man himself, and what a wonderful friend and family friend he was to C.K. Prahalad, is we developed an earlier theory called dominant logic. And dominant logic, it's a bit like what modern people are calling mindset in a way. It's a set of assumptions about the world around you've grown up with, so deeply, deeply wired into the brain, you're not even conscious of them. And these assumptions lead to forms of what I call orthodoxies from the Greek, established ways of doing things, that are resistant to change. For example, you asked me very kindly at the beginning, I'll be fascinated when we begin to come out of this to find if the hotel industry can change its dominant logic. The industry is globalized and we still treat business travelers as if they're domestic. So you can't check in till 3. So that's not very useful if I arrive at 5 a.m. in the morning in London from Singapore, etc., etc. Things like that, small things, but they become, I think, the points of inertia, of immobility for companies. And part of that coaching stuff, Maria, that we were talking about at the beginning, I do with companies as part of strategy, is number one, try to tease from their brain onto a table where we see it, the basic assumptions they hold dear. It's like the corporate constitution. We, the people, believe these to be inalienable truths. You know what I mean? And then examine them. Where do they come from? Do they come from a previous world, or are they still okay? It could be both. But then most importantly, which of these assumptions in your dominant logic and the practices that come from them, do you just have to leave at the roadside to move on? As long as you believe in those things, you're going to miss major turning points and opportunities in the industry. The biggest challenge for me is getting people out of the starting blocks, not how do they manage once they're halfway up the 100 meters.
So, James, are there any comments here from our viewers that we want to pick up on?
You're probably a little bit closer to the screen than I am just now, so I might have to ask Maria. Yeah, you can probably see them better.
You're so vain, you won't put your glasses on, will you? You heard it here first. Right. So, Derek Cheshire says...
I've got a spare pair. I can throw them across to you if you want.
Thank you.
Derek Cheshire says, this is music to my ears. Get out of the way of the train before you can see it. Different techniques, different behaviors, and weak signals all needed. That's nice. Facebook user, so you have to give permission if you're in Facebook to reveal your name, says companies require skilled knowledge people to take their companies in a new direction. Going into companies, you need to be an experienced and skilled in business acumen. Absolutely. Again, Facebook user, cannot see the name. Facebook user being able to diagnose the challenges. We're doing well in Facebook today, I notice. And then how you see the world through a new lens is key right now. So we've got some really great comments. They're all about strategy.
Tremendous. They're wonderful.
Fantastic. Do you want to leave us with a final thought?
One that sums it up. I was fortunate enough a few years ago to go to Davos, the annual conference that brings together world leaders from business, finance, government, all that kind of stuff. I had to give a speech. I had to follow the chief executive of one of these companies you talked about. So not an easy act to follow. I will never forget the point he made. Riveting. He stared to a group of very tough, highly paid CEOs, and with great humility said, the problem with most big institutions is they back off, fail to take on their industry's biggest challenges, and they settle for second-order issues, the comfort zone. And that's what lets the disruptors in, because for them, it's not a big deal to do this kind of stuff. And he said, when you get to that level of management, your brain should be hurting. You're not there to have easy days. And you need to get some sort of intellectual leadership to crack these dominant logic things, which are still there, Maria, in every industry we think about. I mean, personally, not for today, and I say this as a supporter because I've been in the university system at least 1 foot for all of my life, is think about the dominant logic of universities. It will have to change post-COVID, post-COVID. We cannot ask people to come and spend a fortune on courses where there's no live. None.
We're moving to a new time that education will be disrupted as well, which is good to hear. Gordon, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Where's the best place for people to go if they want to learn more about your speaking, your writing? I know you do a lot of visiting professorships. Where should they go and find out more about you?
I don't mind if people want to email me personally, straight to me. Won't go through any sifting system. I'll always reply in some way as soon as I pop, within a day or two. So I think, Maria, do people have my contact address, or we can get it out to them?
I think they should connect with you on LinkedIn, actually, Gordon, because this is our LinkedIn Live. I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
And of course, you're available to book through certain speaker bureaus. We might be mentioning their names a little bit later.
We might. Not to mention them just now, of course.
No. Yeah, not to mention just now. Okay, Gordon, thank you so much. Don't get too cold.
Thank you.
all this talk of Davos. Why do they have to have Davos in a cold place? I'm actually quite happy that they're having it this year in Singapore. So finally they're deciding to have Davos in a warmer place.
Not that
So,
anyone from here is allowed to go, but hey.
No. And thanks everyone for joining us. If you're joining here, because we're now broadcasting on a couple of different platforms and a couple of different places. So thank you if you're just joining us for the first time. This is This Week in Events. And my name is James Taylor.
And my name is Maria Franzoni, but you can tell because our names are there. Look, you
That's
see?
right. So we want to give a shout out before we move on to the next section of the show. We want to give a shout out to our sponsors for this series, who are London Speaker Bureau. London Speaker Bureau are the world's only global speaker bureau. They have offices in 18 countries around the world. So if you're watching this just now and you've been hearing about Gordon, you think about strategy, bringing Gordon or speakers talking about strategy or disruption, head to londonspeakerbureau.com or go to their LinkedIn page, and you can find the creme de la creme of professional speakers.
Lovely, wonderful. So, James, we decided on our topic for this week, and it's quite. I think it might be quite interesting because a little bit controversial. And I'm hoping to get some comments from our audience here. We're talking about: do clients book speakers or do they book experts? And what's the difference between a professional speaker and a professional who speaks? So, do you position yourself, James? Are you a speaker or are you an expert?
Ooh, now, this is an interesting one. I go back and forth on this a little bit. I think of my craft as a professional speaker, but the thing that I'm talking about is my topic, my subject matter expertise. In fact, I think you've got the book as well, and I was just interviewing the author yesterday, Professor Roger Kneebone, who wrote, he is called the experts. He's the expert on experts. And Professor Kneebone, he wrote this amazing book called Experts, the Path to Understanding the Path to Mastery. And he talked about these stages that we go through in order to develop that level of expertise. Because he said, someone that can have expertise, but doesn't necessarily make them an expert. But the thing I thought, and I know the London Speaker Bureau, and you have probably a particular view on this, but I think for a lot of conferences, they'll often want to hire a speaker on maybe the subject of the topic of the conference, let's say, or maybe the industry that this conference is happening for. But what Professor Kneebone and I were talking about yesterday is some of the biggest disruptions we were just hearing about, the biggest innovations come from boundary crossers. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. He was talking about some of the top surgery schools. They have an embroider in residence, and they do something called thread management. Because as a surgeon, you have to learn about how to do different threads and do them very well when you're putting someone together again.
With stitches, yeah?
Yeah, and traditionally, they've never taught thread management for surgeons. So what they did is they brought in this amazing woman who is a top embroiderer, and she actually works with them to understand how to work with thread management. Because if you've ever done any needlework, you know that if you give yourself a little bit too long, you shouldn't, you can come into danger because it starts to roll around on itself. So I think some of the biggest disruptions can come from bringing in experts that don't come from the industry of which that conference is about, who have a completely different perspective. And for me, that's the power of bringing an expert to speak at a conference.
Yeah. So for me, I'm an ex-management consultant. So I come at it from that point of view. And I was the kind of management consultant that would go in and solve the problem, not just write the report and charge a lot of money. So I would solve the problem. We would agree what the results were, what the baseline was, and what the result and the outcome was. And that stayed with me. Although I did it a very long time ago, that kind of discipline stayed with me. And so if I'm thinking about things from a business point of view, from a leadership point of view, from somebody who's got a problem, an issue, or wants to achieve something, who do I want to come in? Do I want somebody who's a good speaker, or do I want the best expert that I can get, who might not be as good a speaker as somebody who is professionally speaking all the time, but can actually solve the problem for me? I know I want the top person in the world. That's who I want. That's who I want to bring in. I want the top expert. So I like experts personally. And so I think the fact that you can speak is great, and you should become a good speaker too. But I want the expertise. I want the solution. I want the outcome. I want the outcome. And so, and in the Bureau, we very much focus on what is the outcome. We very much focus on what are the professions. So we work with professionals, if you like, who speak. So you might have psychologists, you might have strategy experts, you might have all of the different, you might have, any different walk of life, but they then speak about their expertise, or somebody who's actually in a role, somebody who's running a business or in charge of, some kind of, might be a head of diversity, for example, therefore talking about diversity. So that's what we love. We love people who have that kind of positioning. But then, of course, you have people who are professional speakers who speak professionally. And there it's very important that if you are a professional speaker, you are keeping up with your area of expertise and constantly improving and growing and learning, and not just delivering the same speech to the same, every single time, just verbatim repeating it. In the old days, if you think about comedians, a comedian could tell the same joke over and over again because the audience wouldn't have heard it. Now with TV, internet, they have to keep reinventing themselves. And professional speakers need to do that too, because again, you have to keep reinventing that content and tailoring it to your audience.
I guess the thing I would pick up on that, where I have maybe a slight disagreement, it is great if you can bring in the world's expert on XYZ to come and speak at your event, and they can communicate what they have and they can create a result in the room or help that organization deliver results. That's fantastic. Unfortunately, I find a lot of, I guess this is why academics are paid less than top consultants, because academics will often be looking back.
Except for Gordon, by the way, except for
Gordon. And that's where there's power. If you're watching, anyone that's watching this just now, if you're an academic and you can tell stories, and you have a passion and your passion transmits, that's great, because you've probably been the same, where you go and hear a speaker, virtual or in person, someone that's giving a presentation, and they're obviously an expert on this topic, but it's like getting through weeds to try and get there, to find out
to deliver, of course.
And this is the thing, I find it's the invert, where if you go to most university buildings, the academics are on the top floor and the consultants and practitioners are on the bottom floor. If it had to do with salaries and how much people actually made, it would flip it around the other side, because companies, most of our clients, they want results. They want to move in some way. So if I'm hiring diversity, for example, yes, I could hire a great expert academic on diversity, but it's even better if I can find someone, even if they don't have as many papers written under their name, but they have a passion for that topic and they know their topic and they communicate that topic, and I can get a result from them coming into the room. I'd pay them more than I'd pay the academic.
They have to have a track record, James. They have to have been there and done something. It's no good just being passionate about talking about the topic. There are so many people out there who are marketing themselves and saying, I can help you do this and I can help. And then you look at them and they haven't done it themselves for themselves. So that's a problem for me. You have to really have that credibility and expertise. There's a lot of, I don't know what the word is, that so it's very important that you can deliver that outcome.
No, because we were laughing earlier today about Clubhouse, and you're very wary of it.
You're trying to drag me in. You're really I will join you once.
I'm enjoying listening to some of the conversations. Maybe later at night I'll just put it on. Maybe I'll take part every couple of days or something listening to it. But the thing I don't quite understand is a lot of people spending pretty much all day in there, and in their bios, you go in their bios and they're a 7-figure consultant, expert, whatever the thing is. And I thought, how can you be making 7 figures if you're spending your entire day on Clubhouse?
Yeah,
how can you be delivering for clients?
Currency, and where's the decimal point?
Maybe it's Zimbabwean.
Yeah, and you've got decimal points in there as well, of course. Don't forget that.
Yeah, that's true. So, yes. So I think we're kind of close to each other on our views on experts.
We're just riffing. We're having fun here.
What does everyone else think, Maria? What's everyone else saying on it?
Expert user says you need a professional speaker with a specialist topic. Yeah, so a specialist topic is good. We need to be futurist on what's coming now. Yes. Great skills, Maria, whoever that is. Love you. Thank you very much. And we've got the world of self-proclaimed experts has surfaced. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of that about. So you have to be careful. You have to check, that people can deliver what they need to deliver.
Yeah. On the expert, the interview I was doing yesterday with Professor Kneebone, we were kind of talking about those stages that you go through. You go through, the apprentice stage of a job. Then you go through the journeywoman stage. Then you go through the mastery stage where you're probably considered experts. And I think when you move into that, where you're really considered an expert in your field, other experts can spot other experts, even in completely different fields. Yes. And it's things you're looking for is, can they improvise? Can they move into a space, have to talk about their thing, their topic, and something comes out of left field? They've got embedded knowledge, but they can pull that from somewhere, so they can improvise. And then I would say, for someone to be a really great expert, not always, but they should be able to pass it on to others. They should be able to teach, because then they've recognized not just that they can do these things and they have this knowledge, but they can think about how they think. They can understand that kind of metacognition perspective. And so I like seeing those, especially in academia, those people who have really built businesses and done great things, and then they decide to come into academia to teach and to share that knowledge and to help the next generation. I love that.
Yeah, and Scott MacArthur made a lovely comment here. Better than that, James, they have embedded stories. Absolutely. Yeah, stories are great because they help you totally remember, and learn. We could talk about this all day and probably disagree again. But listen, we love to have a tool of the week every week. What have you got this week?
Well, Maria, my tool for this week is the Economist app that I use on my phone. So I subscribe to The Economist. And one of the things, I don't think you necessarily have to be a subscriber. You can get the app. And in the morning, I used to say, Alexa, hey, Alexa, play me my morning briefing from The Economist. And it would read me out. And they hired very good voice actors, very good voiceover people. But recently they hired some not very good voice actors. And it reads out the daily news to you from the Alexa. And it made me all uptight because it was so badly done. And because I love listening to great voices, it made me frustrated. So I got so frustrated, I actually recorded my own entire version of the morning briefing and I sent it to them. And I said, I'm not a professional voice actor, but even me, I feel I could do better than that. So please get a professional voice actor. So if someone's watching, I know I've a couple of my students who are speakers and voice actors, reach out to The Economist editorial team and maybe try and get that gig.
Fantastic. I'm going to see if I can demonstrate my new toy. So I've, because you like voice, you like sound. So I got myself a new microphone. See, this is my new microphone. I'm going to go to the old one so you can hear the difference. This is the old microphone. Now, the old microphone is a good, I can't hear the difference because obviously I'm here. This is the old microphone, which is a good microphone. It's up here. I don't know if you can see it. There you go. It's a Yeti. It's a blue Yeti. It's a great microphone. And this one, I'm just going to go back to the DJ voice microphone.
It's the Mariella Frostrop sound there.
Mariella Frostrop sound. This is the new Yeti X, and I don't know the technical specifications. I just saw that it was new, and I like, me, I like new gadgets. You can't have too many mics, right? And also, I saw that it actually made your voice more rounded and gave you a better. And as you and I both do podcasts, so it's quite important to have a nice sound. Do I sound better with it? Anybody?
You sound great. What does everyone else think? I think it sounds fantastic. It's a much warmer sound. There's less room sound.
I can be a bit shrill when I get excited.
You realize what we're going to make me do, because today I'm just using my little Rode Yeti mic, like the one you use. I'm going to have to, next week, I'm going to have to come on. I'm going to bring the big guns.
No, don't bring
my Rode on.
No, because then that's, I lose hands down. But anyway, it's really nice. It's not too expensive. There'll be notes on This Week in Events website. But listen, before we go, James, there's just one thing I need to say in case you'd forgotten. But next week we're actually changing time for everybody, so please make a note. Because our guest is actually from Singapore and we want to have him live. And so it's actually going to be 10 a.m. next week. So it's a chance to do something. So we might do something different. Maybe we'll go to Clubhouse at 5 o'clock next week, James. Because that'll be available.
And this is good because this also means that some of our people, it's pretty late for them. if they're in Asia or Dubai, or very late for them if they're in Singapore, then this is going to hopefully bring in some new audience to come and listen to the show. So are you allowed to say who the guest is, or are we going to keep that
should we keep it? I don't know. You tell me. What should we do? Should we tease them or not? You tell them. Go on. You tell them.
Maybe give everyone a clue. Maybe they can guess it in the comments.
Well, do you know what? A really interesting speaker who has a fascinating take on customer care and customer service. Really unique take. Love it. So that's going to be fascinating, I think. Your mate as well, isn't he? He's
fantastic. He's wonderful and a great speaker and a lovely human being as well.
Okay.
And a good diver, a good scuba diver. You don't know about.
Okay. All right. Brilliant. Okay. Well, listen. So we'll see you next week at 10 a.m. Thank you for joining us. Have a lovely evening, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
I've got to go to my music. Hang on. Keep talking while I find the music.